Okay, so this is actually not right. In the year 600, the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, was up to here basically, and the Persian Empire was here. So this side, this side was Christian, but not so much Christian. This side was more Christian actually, but fragmented into all those barbarian kingdoms. And the Eastern Empire is still surviving. It's getting smaller, it's getting bigger. At one point it takes back most of Italy, then it loses it. And it's fighting constantly with Persia. Persia is a new dynasty, the Sassanids, who again become very powerful, very rich. Constant warfare. Guess what happens? They keep fighting each other, and then this tribe comes out of the Arabian Peninsula, and eventually destroys both. In fact, destroys the Persian Empire had existed for thousands of years. And bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. The Arabs conquered it in a few years. I don't remember how many years, but just, like 10, 20 years, gone. Really amazing. And then they start expanding everywhere. They conquer, this part was Christian, Syria. Then they conquered all this part, arrived, reached Spain and Sicily. And the Eastern Roman Empire survives for until, it's an important date, 1450 something. So we survived 700 years, the Eastern Roman Empire, but less and less powerful. So it was a very rapid conquest, and that really changed the Western world, because Islam spread, besides spreading on this side, but it spread on this side, and it split the Mediterranean. Okay, so that's the place where these three monotheistic religions converge, and I don't think it's a coincidence what happens next. Simple things. Muhammad prayed towards Jerusalem. Now remember, Jerusalem had just been destroyed by the Romans, changed name, expelled all the Jews. Very few people prayed towards Jerusalem at the time. Muhammad prayed towards Jerusalem. That's what Jews were probably doing. And he worshipped the temple built by Jew, Ibrahim, which is Abraham, in Mecca. And founded Islam on the Tanakh. So anyway, the influence is obvious from the very beginning. Now, difference with the Christianity is a human prophet. Okay, Jesus was eventually declared half divine. This is a human prophet, and Muslims worship him, but it's not like everything he did is good. He was a human being, so he might have done things that you would consider good. A human being. He's just the one who received the truth from God. It's a true monotheism. Christianity is not actually technically monotheist, because you have God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, which I grew up in a Catholic country, I still have to understand what's the Holy Spirit. Then you have the saints, and then over the centuries, every now and then the Virgin Mary skyrockets. John Paul II was another big worshipper of the Virgin Mary. So, but in Islam, there's only one supernatural being, Allah. That's it. Everybody else is human, very human. Okay. Jesus is accepted as a prophet. Back then, Islam was actually very inclusive. Okay, all the prophets that came before Muhammad respected. In fact, in the old days, Muslims did not persecute Christians. Certainly not like the Romans did. You have to wait for the Crusades to have major clashes between the two. Actually, there was a boom of Christian churches in Syria after the invasion of the Arabs. We don't know why the boom occurred, but the funny thing, it happened after it had been occupied by the Muslims. So Muslims didn't have a problem with Christianity. They just, wherever they went, if you read the documents written by others, they kept saying, evil people change the books. Okay, they were basically saying, we know what was really said by God. Okay, but what you guys heard was changed by evil people. So maybe they refer to Roman Empire. You know, in a sense it is true. When Constantine sent the bishops to Nicaea, he probably put constraints on what could be said. Like one thing that people normally don't say is that the Romans killed Jesus. It's always the Jews killed Jesus. That's kind of funny because he was tried and killed by Romans. But probably that was not terribly nice to put in the holy books of Christianity. Go to the emperor and tell him, oh, here is the dogma, and the dogma says that you killed the Son of God. So you know, in a sense. But at the beginning there was absolutely no anti-Christian sentiment. There was anti-Roman sentiment, anti-Byzantine sentiment, anti-Persian, yes. And no anti-Jewish sentiment. So egalitarian society, so that's another one that spreads because it says we're all equal. Okay? So at this point, before we see more of Islam, this slide tells you where the major religions were founded. There's nothing in the West. Okay? You start from the Middle East and then you go all the way east. These are all the major religions of the world. Muhammad. The problem with Muhammad is that he didn't live again. Made the same mistake that the Roman Empire made. No succession rule. Who's the caliph once you die? And so what happened is that they had a civil war. I think 3 of the first 4 caliphs were murdered. Okay, it was a major civil war. But you know, in terms of military conquest, amazing. I mean, they conquer a huge territory very, very quickly. And so that's another thing you can discuss forever. How did that happen? Well, if you're a Muslim, it happened because Allah decided. But if you're not, you know, it's one thing probably. No, maybe I have a slide. I think I have a slide. Now, so the succession is a problem. So Ali, so the family of Muhammad existed, and so some people thought, well, the family should inherit the quote-unquote throne, and others thought otherwise. So there was the civil war. At the end, the people who thought otherwise prevailed, and that's the schism between Sunnis and Shiites to this day. To this day, the Shiites think the Sunnis killed the family of the Prophet. It's not a nice thing to do. So that's where it started. Anyway, the Arab Empire, 750. I mean, this is a century. In 1 century, look how you know, they conquered Persia, of course Arabia, most of the Middle East, North Africa, all the way to Spain. That's very impressive. Fighting against the 2 biggest empires of the time. They defeated both of them very rapidly, totally defeated this one. They took half of that one. So that was impressive. Reasons. So Persia and Byzantium kept fighting each other. In history, that's never a terribly good thing to do, because eventually somebody else comes up, and you find that you've, you know, depleted your energies. North Africa and the Middle Eastern populations actually hated Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, for a number of reasons. You know, oppressor, different kind of Christianity, different stories. But a lot of the subjects of the Eastern Roman Empire actually did not like to be subject to the Eastern Roman Empire. And today, when we think Muslims invade, we think of people who hate the civilization. Back then, no. You know, most likely, when the Muslims came, I don't think they were viewed as liberators, but they certainly weren't viewed as brutal, ferocious enemies. Okay, there's no record of massacres in Alexandria or in Spain. Of course, they had to fight against armies, but in terms of the population, it doesn't look like they had any hatred towards the population. So most likely, the people who lived there, North Africa, for example, they were under one dictator, and then somebody else comes. You know, their motivation to fight is not that great unless they really like their dictator, which was not the case. So that might have made it easier.
Was there reason for expanding, like just for resources, or was it a religiously driven expansion?
Well, if you believe what they said, it was religious. Allah said so. Allah said so. Well, these I will skip a lot, but this is the first religious empire. This is an empire that exists specifically because of a religion. Okay? Before that, Roman Empire, Greek, China, there's never a religious motive behind what they do. Brotherhood, that's very important. Muslims are brothers. And that creates a bond that is very strong. Right? I know today it's kind of funny to think of people in ISIS killing all those other Muslims, but I think Islamic terrorists kill a lot more Muslims than non-Muslims today, right? But that brotherhood is still there, If you, like when the United States invaded Iraq, the whole Islamic world resented it. And some people in this country are probably puzzled. We are kicking out this brutal dictator Saddam Hussein. Yeah, but in doing that you kill some Muslims, then all the Muslims of the world rise up. And that's also true to some extent of Christians and Buddhists, whatever. If one Christian is killed in Turkey, it makes the headlines in the New York Times. But it's a different kind of bonding. And this was very important for Islam to spread peacefully in the Far East, actually. The Far East has no major conquest. It just spread because the idea of brotherhood was seen well, like traders, if a Muslim cannot cheat another Muslim. So if you're both Muslims, you can trust each other. I can just leave you my wallet and I know you will not steal it. If you steal it, it's really bad. So punishment is caused. So that was welcome. And in some places, there was, poverty, disease, whatever, and the brotherhood was a good thing. The richer person would help you. So in the Far East, Islam spread mostly just because of this brotherhood idea, not because of the others. So yeah, Mediterranean Middle East war. At the same time, there was slavery. Slavery has been ubiquitous in the human civilization. Central Asia and Africa spread a lot through slavery. The whole eastern coast of Africa was Muslim because they were slave traders. But Far East, mostly trade. And Europe, USA today, immigration. Now, why? So at some point there's an incredible boom of Islamic civilization, right? Which today is hard to believe, but it was the greatest civilization on Earth at some point, for a brief period actually. But it was. So what created that thing? If you start thinking, these people came from the desert of Arabia. What was special about them? Well, about them, not much. But, well, first of all, the Umayyads, the first dynasty, was replaced very quickly by the Abbasids. The Abbasids had the capital in Baghdad. Baghdad is a Persian city. The Abbasids were Persians. Okay, actually, that civilization had been conquered and destroyed by the Arabs, but actually, with the Abbasid Empire, it's almost like they came back, because it was a Persian dynasty. Okay, so first of all, they came with that heritage. But second, when you conquer the land of the Greeks, the land of the Egyptians, the land of the Jews, the land of Zoroastrians, part of India eventually, right? You put together the greatest civilizations of the world, almost all of them, not China, right? Well, something happens when you do that. So so Islam, by conquering those lands, brought in all this great civilization into one. Second, global trade. Free trade, again. The Roman Empire created free trade in the Mediterranean. That eventually spawned an economic boom and so on. Well, the Muslims did the same from Spain all the way to the Far East. That's a huge free trading bloc. Free trade always generates economic boom. So the economy skyrocketed. And of course peace, because in the middle there were for a while there were no major wars, invasions. So there's a number of reasons why those lands acquired political power, money, and ideas. A footnote: Muslims were a minority. I don't want this to sound too negative, but Muslims did not force everybody to convert. And the dhimmis, the religious minorities, were respected. They had their own rights, they had their own laws. In some places they are confined in some parts of the city, but the vast majority of the bureaucracy of the architects, if you read their story, they were not Muslims, at least not originally. Later, many of the great Muslims married Christian princesses. So, it was a very inclusive society. That's what I want to say. Very inclusive society. In the beginning, Muslims were a minority. Okay. Then eventually, of course, becomes a majority because only Muslims can rule. So everybody wants to rule. So, generation after generation, you tend to convert. I assume you know about the Quran and the Hadith. Very important, the Hadith, because the Hadith are the actions of the Prophet, of Muhammad. So if he did something, then that's an example. All this Quran was found, by the way, was it last year or this year? In Birmingham. This is the oldest fragment of the Quran. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to do all the details. Egalitarian, I think I already said a lot of these things. No church, that's important actually. No church. There's no equivalent of the Pope in Islam to this day. Okay, there's very respected muftis, ayatollahs, depending clerics, but there's no Pope. Some Muslims actually think that's a problem. They don't have somebody who can just say terrorism is bad. Period. It's not like the Pope saying something is bad has changed a lot in the Christian world, but there's no ultimate moral authority in Islam. So it's really monotheistic. No Holy Spirit, no miracles. Muhammad did not perform miracles. Big difference. Jesus performed miracles. Muhammad does not. It just tells you. Okay. No saints. Nothing implausible. So in a sense, it's actually a more credible story. It is a credible story. I mean, it's hard to believe that Jesus resurrected somebody, resurrected himself. It's not difficult to believe that Muhammad fought a war, went to Mecca, conquered Mecca, and so on and so on. I mean, that happens. Other than that, it's pretty much like Christianity. I mean, there's and Judaism. There's a trajectory. There's an end. Somebody will come. They call it the Mahdi, which is also often identified with Jesus reborn. So it's also inclusive in that sense. I mean, it does come from Judaism after all. It does accept the Old Testament, and it accepts the New Testament with various variations. It just does not accept that Jesus was a God. Okay? Jesus was one of the prophets that came before Muhammad with many others. Sunni and Shia, I already told you, the split that exists to this day. Sufism is another brand of Islam, still around, but it's been persecuted so much over the centuries that never became particularly powerful, except maybe in Central Asia. The Sufis are more like Buddhists, or like the most spiritual Christian monks and so-called Gnostics. These are people who believe in very abstract concepts. The whole universe is God, everything is God, you have to become one with God. God is the universe. And that's similar to Buddhism, to the most spiritual forms of Christian monastic life, and to Platonism, to Greek philosophy. So it's kind of an interesting thing. This is the Abbasids, as I said, capital in Baghdad, somewhere here. And Baghdad was a Persian city. That's why Baghdad majority Shia. It was Persian for a long time. It was the capital of the Persian state for a while. Persian culture, tolerance. Baghdad becomes the new Alexandria. Baghdad becomes a major cultural center. Big library. There was a big library in Alexandria. Guess what? The big library in Baghdad. A lot of the great age of translation. A lot of the great works of Greek philosophy, not translated in Latin, translated in Arabic. Europe will relearn them through the Arabic versions. Okay, Aristotle comes back to Europe when we translate the Arabic into Latin, I guess. And the great philosophers, scientists of the Islamic world at this point, Baghdad. You see a lot of them in Baghdad. What is funny is that this part is hardly in the maps of the Islamic kingdoms, empires, until 1932. This is 1932, whatever. Until Saudi unifies that part of the world. It was really forgotten. The only thing that people remembered is Mecca because of the pilgrimage. And there were tribes in control of the various routes, and they had to allow pilgrims to go there. But even the Ottoman Empire, you look at some of the maps, and there's a hole in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula. So it came from there, Islam came from there, the Arabs invaded from there, the Arabic language was adopted by everybody. Persians still speak their language, but they adopted the Arabic script. But the funny thing is that this part was pretty much forgotten until they discovered oil, pretty much. Anyway, so lots of things happen at that time, and that's the beginning of the rising civilization of Islam. Science, mathematics, medicine, biology, lots of things. That's, big names. It doesn't last a long time because they start fragmenting. There's the Umayyads, which is the original dynasty, settles in Spain and keeps Spain. The Fatimids rule Egypt, somebody else Mesopotamia, somebody else Persia, and these are the civil wars of the Islamic world that go on for a long time, until today, basically. Okay, I don't want to do the philosopher, just trust me that they're the great philosophers. So, and at this point you really have to distinguish Arabs and Muslims, because initially it's one-to-one, right? Arabs conquer, when we say Arabs conquer this and that, it's Muslims. But at this point Islam has gone way beyond the Arabs. Yes, Arabs rule in Spain, Arabs rule in Persia, well, sort of. The Abbasids, as I said, are Persians. But Islam spreads to people who are obviously not Arab, in particularly to Central Asia. Central Asia becomes mostly, actually I think completely Muslim. And meanwhile, the Arab empire is fragmenting. It's not collapsing, it's just fragmenting in the different kingdoms. Some of them fight each other, some of them coexist peacefully, but it's fragmenting. And the people from Central Asia, we tend to call them Turks. It would be better to call them Turkish, because their language is a variant of the Turkish language. And the first ones that come, and those are the ones, to give you a reference point, that are involved in the Crusades. The first one that comes from Central Asia and invade a lot of the historical lands of Islam are the Seljuks, and later it's the Ottomans. So these are Turkish people. And I guess we leave the story there then. Anyway, so they rule for a while. That's when the Crusades happen. That's the guy who reconquers Jerusalem and creates a little bit of unity in that part of the world. The rest of the Islamic world still fragmented. Then who destroys the Seljuks? The Mongols. And I think we'll leave it with the Mongols here. So that when the Mongols come, they expand dramatically. They conquer China, they conquer most of this part of the world, which includes Persia, Iran, and they reach Turkey, just the border with Syria. And on this side, they reach the border with Poland. So that a number of civilizations have in common the Mongol invasion, because it breaks something. You know? Like, as you can see, they invaded most of Russia, most of inhabited Russia. So for China, for Russia, from the Islamic world, the Mongol invasion separates two ages. What I wanted to say is that then there's another Turkish people that come from Central Asia, the Ottomans, they come later, and they will also conquer what today is Istanbul. That's a very important, but I guess it's next time. So if you look at what we've done, I mean, if you look at the general thing, I mean, monotheism didn't exist at some point. And then it's spread all over the world. Today it's easy to see monotheism everywhere, but some of it originated from the Roman Empire, and then some of the countries of the Roman Empire became colonial powers, so they exported monotheism. And Islam spread in this direction.